May 30, 2014, Game 5, Eastern Conference Finals. The Indiana Pacers are one win away from eliminating LeBron James in the Miami Heat. And in that moment, with the whole basketball world watching, Lance Stephenson leans in and blows in LeBron's ear. LeBron smiles, laughs, even like it tickled. And that smile, that single smile, it ended Lance Stephenson's career. Think about what it means to be called born ready. Not a nickname from friends, but a brand, an identity, a prophecy assigned at 16. Lance Stephenson carried that name from Lincoln High School in Brooklyn. Scouts called him the next big thing, comparing him to the greatest. At 16, he was already myth, already legend. But what they don't tell you about born ready, ready for what, exactly? This is the story of a man chasing one moment, close to greatness, feeling the breath of the best player, then watching it disappear. This is the story of Lance Stephenson, and the smile that broke him. August 1, 1990. Flatbush, Brooklyn, a neighborhood that produces fighters. Not by choice, but necessity. His father, Lance Sr., played semi-pro. His uncle Eric was an NBA draft pick who never quite made it. Basketball ran in the blood, and the pressure ran deeper. By Lincoln High, recruiting services saw him as a foregone conclusion. In 2009, ESPN named him the #1 recruit. Not one of the best, but the best. At Lincoln, he averaged 30 points a game. Comparisons to LeBron, Kobe, Oscar Robertson came fast. New York City tabloids called him the chosen one of Brooklyn. Hype was at full volume. Hype doesn't build you, it encases you. Like concrete poured around your ankles before you've learned to walk on your own. 1 year at the University of Cincinnati. His stats were fine, but the buzz had softened. Scouts who compared him to LeBron now hedged. Drafted 40th overall in 2010. Second round. To the Indiana Pacers. Not the lottery pick destiny promised. Not the billboard moment expected. Just 40th. In Indiana, something happened that nobody predicted. Under coach Frank Vogel, the Pacers were building something unusual. A defensive first, blue-collar team that didn't care about flash. No superstars. Just grit. And Lance? Lance fit right in. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he didn't have to be born ready. He just had to be useful. By 2012-13, he was averaging 13 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. Numbers that don't scream all-star but whisper something more important, impact. The kind of player who makes things happen that don't show up on a stat sheet. The kind who defends, who runs the floor, who talks trash and means it. The Pacers reached the Eastern Conference Finals that year. They pushed LeBron's Heat to 7 games. They lost, but they made the best team nervous. Lance wasn't the best player on the court, but he was the most unpredictable. And in basketball, sometimes unpredictable is the most dangerous. The 2013-14 season was supposed to be different. The Pacers stormed to the #1 seed. And at the center was Lance Stephenson playing his best basketball. 13.8 points, 7.2 rebounds, 5.5 assists, all career highs. He was everywhere, defending, initiating offense, drawing attention. Sports Illustrated called him a potential all-star. The Athletic wrote the Pacers found their identity in a kid Brooklyn had written off. He was everything he was supposed to be, and he was just getting started. May 2014. Eastern Conference Finals. Indiana Pacers vs. Miami Heat. The Pacers win Game 1 in Miami, 107-96. The basketball world takes notice. The Heat win Game 2. The series evens out. The Pacers win Game 3 back in Indiana. They lead the series to 2-1. One more win in the next 3 games and LeBron James' dynasty is over. Not paused. Over. Think about what that means. LeBron James, 2-time defending champion, at the apex of his powers, one bad week from elimination. At the hands of a team from Indiana. At the hands, in part, of a kid from Brooklyn nobody expected to be here. Then something shifts. It starts small. Lance is everywhere, jaw flapping, gesturing, playing to the crowd. His defense on LeBron is physical, personal, relentless. He's under LeBron's skin. At least, that's what he thinks. Game 4. The Pacers lose 100-90. Lance finishes with 9 points. More troubling, he seems distracted, like the performance is starting to cost him the game. Game 5. May 30, 2014. Late in the game, the Pacers are trailing but hanging on. Lance checks in. He guards LeBron. He's talking, gesticulating. And then, in a moment that will loop forever on the internet, he leans toward LeBron James and exhales. A puff of breath, a taunt. LeBron doesn't flinch. Doesn't argue. Doesn't step back. He smiles. That smile is the most psychologically devastating thing for Lance. Not anger, that would have meant Lance got to him. Not indifference, that would have been dismissal. But a smile, a laugh. The kind you give a child who did something funny by accident. LeBron said afterward he thought it was pretty funny. He didn't let it bother him. And that was the problem. Lance had launched his most powerful psychological weapon, and it had been absorbed and returned as amusement. The Heat won Game 5. Then Game 6. The series was over. Indiana was eliminated. Lance averaged 11 points in that series. 5 turnovers in Game 6 alone. The player who had spent an entire season becoming dangerous had, in the biggest moment, become a liability. In sports psychology, there's a concept called choking under pressure, but that's too simple for what happened here. This wasn't physical. This was something deeper. Lance had made LeBron the center of his universe. And when LeBron refused to be rattled, the center collapsed. The Pacers were done. And in ways Lance couldn't have understood yet, so was he. July 2014. Lance Stevenson is a free agent. Indiana wants to re-sign him. Frank Vogel wants him back. Paul George wants him back. The Pacers, who built their identity around him, want their guy back. Lance leaves. 3 years, $27 million. The Charlotte Hornets. Here's what they don't tell you in business coverage. Athletes who built their identity around proving something often struggle when the context changes. The Pacers were the perfect environment. Defensive culture. Defined roles. A team that needed his particular brand of chaos. Charlotte was different. More isolated. More expectation. Less structure. The numbers from that Charlotte season are not pretty. 9.9 points. 4.5 rebounds. More turnovers and assists. He was traded to the Los Angeles Clippers in February. Then the Memphis Grizzlies. Then back to Indiana, like a prodigal son, but it wasn't the same. The timing had passed. The team had been dismantled. Paul George was gone. Lance bounced. That's the word for it. Los Angeles Lakers. New Orleans Pelicans. China. Back to the NBA fringe. The career that once looked inevitable had settled between useful and forgotten. It's worth pausing here, because sports media loves the narratives, the comeback and the collapse. What we rarely discuss is the third thing. The slow erosion. The way a player can be technically present in the league for years while the best version of themselves exists only in the past. That's harder to cover. Harder to quantify. Harder to feel. Lance didn't spiral publicly. He wasn't a cautionary tale in the classic sense. There was no dramatic break. Just a gradual drift from the center to the margins. From the starting lineup to the roster bubble. From the potential all-star to the answer to a trivia question. There's a term in sports psychology, identity foreclosure. It describes what happens when an athlete's sense of self is so deeply fused with their athletic identity that any disruption triggers a crisis. Lance was born ready before he could consent to being born ready. The nickname wasn't a reflection of who he was. It was a contract signed at 16. When the Charlotte experiment failed, when the contract money was spent and the spotlight moved on, what was left? The kid from Brooklyn who was supposed to be the next LeBron? The pacer who blew in LeBron's ear and watched LeBron laugh? Both of those identities were anchored to someone else's story. Here's the truth nobody tells you in the highlight reels. The players who suffer most aren't the ones who failed spectacularly. They're the ones who almost made it. Almost. The ones who were close enough to feel the heat of the spotlight but not close enough to stay in it. Those are the careers that haunt you. If you're watching this right now, you care about the stories behind the box scores. That's what we do here every week. These are the ones that deserve to be told. Because Lance Stephenson's story isn't about failure. It's about the cost of expectation, the price of a nickname, the weight of a smile from LeBron James. Let's play the what-if game. Because that's what Parallel Worlds is for. Game 5. 2014 Eastern Conference Finals. Same game. Different choice. Lance doesn't blow in LeBron's ear. Lance doesn't turn himself into a spectacle. Lance plays basketball. His per-game averages that regular season were the best on a team that won 56 games. The game where he focused purely on basketball. The Pacers won. The games where the theater took over. They lost. That's not coincidence. That's data. In an alternate timeline, the Pacers close out the Heat in 6 games. Lance is a hero. Indiana probably faces the San Antonio Spurs in the finals, a more favorable matchup. Maybe they win. Maybe they don't. But Lance is at the center of it. Not as a footnote. As the story. And maybe that version of Lance Stephenson stays in Indiana, takes a hometown discount, builds something real alongside whoever the Pacers drafted, has a 12-year career defined by winning, not wandering. We'll never know. And neither will he. What we do know is this: Lance Stephenson, at his best, was a genuinely great basketball player. Not great the way LeBron is great, but great in the way that matters to a team, irreplaceable, electric, making everyone around him better. The Pacers of 2013-14 were arguably the most dangerous team in the Eastern Conference. And Lance was central to that danger. By 2024, Lance had carved out a playing career in the NBA G League, occasional NBA roster spots, and stints overseas. He kept playing. Because that's what you do when basketball is the only language you've ever spoken fluently. You keep speaking it even when no one's listening. His story tells us something about the NBA and about fame at large. We hand out prophecies to teenagers. We crown them before they've lived. And then when they don't become the prophecy, we move on. We find someone new to crown. We never ask what happens to the kid we left behind. These stories matter. The ones that don't end cleanly. The ones without a redemption arc wrapped in a bow. These are the ones that deserve to be remembered. Born ready. Ready for what, exactly? Maybe that was always the wrong question. Maybe the right question is, ready on whose terms? The saddest part of the Lance Stephenson story isn't the ear blow. The saddest part is that it worked on him. He got so deep into LeBron's head that he forgot to play basketball. And LeBron, the most mentally disciplined player, just smiled and moved on, while Lance carried that smile with him for the rest of his career. That's what identity does when it's built on someone else's reaction. When your greatness requires their fear, and they refuse to be afraid. Born Ready is a beautiful name. But nobody tells you, ready is not the same as arrived. And there's a whole life that happens in the space between. If this story made you feel something, subscribe. Every week we find the player history forgot. The moment nobody explained. The truth behind the box score. Next week on Hoop Tales, he was the best player on the floor the night the lottery was fixed, and nobody has told his side of the story yet.